Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to start this video with what I know is probably not what people initially come to this channel for, but what's the point in having even a small platform if I'm not going to use it for something positive? Everyone here is probably here because you love history. You study it, you like it, you enjoy it, you want to learn more about it, just like me. And I feel there's a lot that can be learnt from history. And right now, what's happening in Ukraine, which is in and of itself making history, is another example of simply history repeating itself. And I think we all need to understand that attacking civilians, attacking those that can't defend themselves, hospitals, the injured, is unacceptable in any era. If one thing we've learned from learning about the Roman Empire and their invasions across, well, any nation, when one country imposes itself on another, it is rarely in the best interests of those whom are being invaded. History has an unfortunate tendency to repeat itself. If you actually break up history, you notice that history is most commonly broken up by wars, not by periods of peace. Some people even believe that periods of peace are nothing more than a layover, a time to prepare for the next war that'll be coming around the corner. This is unfortunate because, as I said, we break up our history by the wars, the Napoleonic Wars, the First World War, the Second World War, the Crimean War. We don't mention a golden age of peace in between. We don't mention times of innovation and change that take place between them. Unfortunately, it's just not human nature. And what I'm getting at is what's happening in Ukraine currently is completely unacceptable and illegal. And it's happened before. It'll happen again, unfortunately. We always tout, especially in Britain, we go on about never forget. Unfortunately, I think we've forgotten. Or at least some people have. Now I know that there are people in Ukraine who are suffering and they need help from the international community. And I don't mean military intervention, not necessarily. I hope it doesn't come to that. But they do need support and help from the wider international community, as do people in Russia, because it's not too late for Russia to realize the error of its ways and that they're being taken down a path which will lead them only to their own suffering and pain in the long run by, once again, a man who may or may not genuinely have had good intentions in what he did. I'm not here to judge that. I'm not qualified to. But all the same, the path they're going down is an unacceptable one, and hopefully they'll remember the lessons of the past before they completely repeat them. So with that little melodrama out of the way, let's get here for what everyone actually clicked on this video for and try and take our minds off the darkness of the last few years and take us back into the darkness of prehistory. And that would be this episode. I'm going to be talking about a burial, specifically one known as the warrior priest. This is a name we have ascribed to this person. Whether or not they truly were a warrior priest is, well, we'll find out. We'll have a look at the burial, what the person was, when roughly they were buried, and who they may have been and the significance. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. And let's get started. Right, so first, the warrior priest, as he's colloquially known, is a burial found near to Fishbourne Palace back in 2008. Fishbourne Palace is an old Roman villa that's, I say intact, it's not really intact, but it has some fantastic mosaics and the basic floor plan is still intact and is visible and you can go and see it. The burial was found near there. It dates to about 50 BC approximately, and there's a lot of wild speculation in my opinion as to who this man may have been and what he may have done. But considering his time period and the fact that he was dressed like a warrior, to be honest, it's probably not some unrealistic beliefs as to what this man may have done. He may have been associated with Commius the Gaul, a man who I am going to be doing a video on at some point, but in brief, he basically was from the continent, as the name Commius the Gaul would suggest, and he had a little bit of a falling out with Julius Caesar, and he fled to Britain, and his territories on the continent were absorbed into the Roman Empire, but he also had territories in Britain, so he came here, basically. And there was also Commius the Younger, who was obviously his son. This man may have been associated with him and involved in the resistance and fight against the Romans on the continent, and possibly even fought against Julius Caesar when he invaded Britain, as this burial does date to about 50 BC, which could imply, and I say imply, that he was present for those battles. He may have even actually been killed by the forces of Julius Caesar when they invaded Britannia. It is possible, if not likely, and who knows? That's the problem, there's no way of knowing, they didn't exactly write anything down. The burial itself is obviously of a single man who is adorned quite elaborately with war gear, as well as various other items, including a ritually destroyed sword, which is something the Celts used to do. They also used to do this in the Bronze Age. It seems to have been an ancient world thing. Basically, you took an item, such as a sword, and you would break it, either distort the blade, bend it. Basically, you rendered it useless, probably to prevent anyone from looting it, and then it would be put as a votive offering, usually into water. But in this occasion, it was actually placed in a burial. The most impressive thing in the burial was the helmet. Basically a dome helmet, but with an incredibly elaborate headdress. Sort of like a huge crest bisecting the centre of the helmet that would have kind of looked like, for lack of a better analogy, a bit of a peacock. And it probably wasn't a practical suit of armour. My feeling would be this will be more of a ceremonial warrior's armour, which is how I come to the conclusion. It's like there's a lot of supposition as to who this man may or may not have been in reality. But it is entirely plausible that he also had proper weapons and armour that he used separate to this, and this was simply what was either made for him to be buried in, or was the equivalent of like a triumphal parade gear. It's not been determined exactly where this man was from yet. He may have been a Briton, he may have been from the continent, it's not entirely clear. We'll assume he's British as he was buried in Britannia, but as I said, if he was truly associated with Commius the Gaul, he may have been Belgic, Gaulish, or even Germanic in origin. And I think it's super cool. There's also other features of the grave, included a series of pots that were buried around the man's head, which likely would have had food or drink inside them when he was buried, sort of a take to the afterlife and carry on partying kind of idea. This is by no means the only burial of a warrior ever found, or very impressive Celtic burial ever discovered. There's a particularly impressive one from Germany I may do a video on at some point, where it was actually more of a underground mausoleum which the man was buried in. He had all kinds of fine furniture and other things. It was literally an open space. He wasn't buried like surrounded by dirt. He was certainly underground, but it was basically like a room they built underground. They interred him in, a bit like, again to give the analogy, a bit like an Egyptian pharaoh. He would have been laid in state out in the open, but in an underground sealed room filled with all kinds of riches that he had in his lifetime. It's probably the most impressive Iron Age Celtic burial anywhere in Europe. There's also another one which is of interest to me, which is known as the Deal burial. And basically there's a burial in Austria, and in short, I'm not going to go into it much here, he's wearing an iron crown, a bronze crown, which is identical, as far as anyone can tell, to a similar burial found in Kent. So there are two people, respectively, from the 2nd century BC, buried, one in Austria and one in Britannia, wearing the same gear, which does lend itself to the, proof that there was a distinct artistic style and shared culture by the Celts, sometimes known as the Latin style. There was also the Hallstatt, which I'll do in future videos and break down exactly what those are, but basically it's an artistic style. It's a way of identifying a sort of spread of a culture, in brief. And anyway, it should be noted also, Latin style was the style of the armour and weapons that the warrior priest was buried in. Now, my personal speculations, and these are again just my personal speculations, you can disagree with them, that's fine. The idea that this guy was a warrior priest comes from the idea that druids were more than just priests to the Celts. They weren't like our modern notion of a priest, who basically lived in a church and gives everyone spiritual advice and etc, etc, etc. They were much more involved in politics, they were involved in war, they were involved in medicine, they were involved in law. They were basically the everything and anything of the Celtic world, both in Britannia and on the continent. So the idea that this guy could have actually been some kind of warrior priest class is not beyond the realm of possibility. In fact, I think it's quite likely, considering the wealth and status they seem to have, but the ceremonial nature of the armour, particularly the helmet, it does say to me more ceremonial. When you get to ceremonial in that age, you're probably looking at the druid classes. It does seem that way, at least from my observation. Whether or not he was from the continent or Britannia, I think is immaterial. I don't think it really matters, other than just out of curiosity. It's the same for where was the armour made. It doesn't really matter. It was made of iron. It could have been made in either. It could have been made in the continent or in Britannia. It was a similar artistic style used in both areas. And considering the area, he may have been part of the Atrebates tribe. So, which would also, lend itself to the continental connections. The Atrebates were there as well. But he may have been purely a homegrown. He may have just been where he was buried. But it seems likely, considering how powerful this man clearly was in life, he would have been taken back to his homelands to be buried. Now, if his homelands in the continent had been conquered by the Romans, clearly he couldn't go there, so he was given an impressive burial here. He may have fought against the Romans. That is just fanciful. I'd like to think he did, because I would like to think that any warrior of note would have turned up on the beaches to fight against the Romans, particularly against Julius Caesar, considering his reputation. And if this man had fought in the continent, his knowledge of Julius Caesar and Roman battle tactics would have been absolutely invaluable to the Celts who were here, who were very experienced at war, but of course had not really fought against the Romans much. Now, whether again this guy was from the continent or from Britannia, if he had fought against the Romans on the continent, his knowledge would have been very useful. So yeah, I'd like to believe he fought against the Romans, but that's, again, to me, speculation. There's no evidence exactly as to what killed him. He may have simply died of natural causes. He could have had cancer. He could have simply got some kind of infection. Anything. But there's no... If he was killed, as in battle, it was soft tissue damage. There's nothing been found on the skeleton, at least not in my research, that would tell me what exactly he died from. Nothing's been found. However, you can visit and see the artifacts, particularly the very impressive sort of broken sword and that very impressive headdress and those such things in Britannia. Well, Britannia? In Britain, of course. At the Novium Museum in Chichester, where it's on display. There are also replicas, basically modern recreations of this man, as well as more detailed, up-to-date theories as to what exactly his life was like and who he was. So that's the warrior priest. Let me know in the comments below what you think of him, and of course tell me of any others you know about from Britannia and the continent, because there are several. In particular, as I said, that one in Germany is absolutely magnificent. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, as we are at the end now, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.